Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone on the West Coast, that is. Good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. Thanks so much for joining today. Let's pause quickly for everybody to get logged in, and I'll tell you a little bit more about today's program. My name is Nick Bailey. I am a co-founder of From Day One, and this is a forum on corporate values. And we're looking forward to hosting today's webinar, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. But before I do, I wanted to ask you a favor. It's been quite a year of change, and just like you and basically everybody in the planet, over here at From Day One, we've been working every day to process and try to understand all of the change that's been going on, especially in the workplace. And we're working to try to understand that change so we can better create content. Things like this webinar that you're watching right now, our conferences, the journalism that we run on our website and our newsletter. So we've put together a series of surveys on a whole bunch of topics that we think will be relevant to you and to your job, especially. We really want to know what you think so we can plan ahead. So during this webinar, I'm going to share two links with you. These are straightforward reader surveys. They're anonymous, if you'd like them to be. One is on HR leadership and one is on age diversity. And we're really, really curious to hear your guys' thoughts. So I'm going to put the first link into chat right now as we're talking. If you check the chat, you should be seeing it. Hopefully everybody's just got a link if you look on your Zoom client there. So click on it right now, right this second. It's a relatively short survey. You could fill it out while I'm finishing up this intro. Doesn't take long. And look out, I'm going to give you another link during the break. That's going to come up in about half an hour. Please don't hesitate, click, share your thoughts. We really would love to hear from you. We do these webinars twice a week. We do conferences constantly. And I'm often feeling like I'm talking into a screen, which is in fact what I'm doing. And I'd love for that screen, which is you, to be able to talk back to us. We'd like to hear what you have to say, not just listen to ourselves talk. So please fill out the surveys and give us a sense of your thoughts on these two issues that we're polling on this week. Now, on to our webinar. Today, we're going to be exploring a topic that focuses on the intersection of talent acquisition, hiring equity, and retention efforts for talent from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds in the tech industry. We're also going to address the myth of the pipeline problem and examine how companies can rectify systems and cultures that perpetuate biases, sexism, and racism. Our title for today's session is How to Be Anti-Racist in Your Tech Hiring. In the wake of the violence that claimed the life of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, many companies spoke out in support of greater racial justice, equity, inclusion within their companies. Having made promises to unlock opportunity for underserved populations, tech employers need to remove many of these systemic obstacles that stand in the way. The goal should be better access, reduced bias, and overall greater inclusion. And job candidates need to be better prepared to navigate the hiring process, including job interviews and so on. Employers have to be intentional about employee experience from the very, very, very beginning. Our sponsor for today's webinar is Karat. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Karat's purpose is to unlock opportunity, both for hiring companies and candidates. With 24/7 live interviews, enterprise-grade interview infrastructure, and unmatched data visibility, Karat helps companies hire faster and more effectively by unlocking productive engineering hours, improving the candidate experience, and delivering a hiring signal that engineering leaders specifically can trust. Now, last, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on demand within about 24 hours after the event. You can look out for an email in about 24 hours that'll have that link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits. This session is authorized for SHRM and HRCI, and look out for an email 24 hours after the conclusion of this webinar with your activity info. Lastly, there'll be a written account of this conversation on our website. That's fromday1.co, fromdayone.co. And in an hour, that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, will be our Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime, including right this second, using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address those at the top of the hour. With all of that out of the way, I hope you guys are almost done with your surveys and filling those out. We really appreciate it. And I'd like to introduce our moderator, Lydia Dishman. She's a business journalist. She reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership. She's written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, Popular Science, The New York Times, among many, many others, and has hosted many of our webinars, and we love her. Lydia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That's a stellar introduction, and I do so enjoy doing these webinars and being with you all today. So thank you out there. I cannot see you, but I know you're there. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion for you. I wanted to start by saying that we all know that there's a strong business case for having a diverse workforce, but it does bear repeating that racially and ethnically diverse companies are 36% more likely to outperform their competitors. And 67% of job seekers consider a diverse workforce an important factor when evaluating companies and job offers. Yet, of course, there's a caveat, 67% of the largest tech companies are made up of less than 5% Black employees. And controlling for all racial disparities in tech hiring, white employees are significantly overrepresented in leadership positions, while all other racial groups are underrepresented. This is possibly due to the fact that only 23% of HR professionals think that D&I programs in their companies are effective, and many companies struggle with the complexity of diversity in their recruiting efforts. They often fail to align their actual practices with their organizational goals. And so all of this can thwart efforts to attract and retain talent from underrepresented groups. So, here to discuss some better ways that leaders can center their hiring practices on anti-racist strategies, I have with me an accomplished and insightful group of professionals, and I'd like them all to introduce themselves and tell us very briefly about their work and a bit of background on where you are in your recruitment efforts. So, Portia, I'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you very much, Lydia, and thank you, Nick, as well. I will tell you that my name is Portia Kibble Smith. I happen to be the head of DE&I at Karat. And I will tell you that I am pleased to be here this afternoon. At Karat, we do actually interviews, and we've done over 80,000 of them. And we make sure that our interviews, they are technical interviews. We want to make sure that they're fair, predictive, and enjoyable. And we partner with companies to actually do the interviews. So we've got clients like Intuit, Indeed, Peloton, and of course, Flatiron Health. And so my role at Karat is really to look not only at what we are doing internally, but also to look externally, because many of our customers want to know what are some of the best practices of being more inclusive with their hiring. What can we do differently in order to be, an employer of choice? And so I will tell you that one of the things that you have to do is make sure that the people who are creating and conducting the technical interviews represent everybody, all of us. And so I will tell you that earlier this week, I am pleased to say that we announced a program called Brilliant Black Minds. And that program is centered around making sure that it is we're trying to close the access gap for technical hiring, because we find that many of our underrepresented minority students don't have the skills that they need in order to even pass the first interview. So if they're not going to pass the first interview, they're not going to get the second interview, nor will they get the job. So I think that we have to start with the basics, especially when we talk about hiring and being fair and equitable.
Thank you very much, Portia. And since you teed Flatiron Health up, let's go to Kat next.
Okay.
Yeah, so hi there. My name is Kat Miller. I'm VP of Engineering at Flatiron Health. We're an oncology data and analytics company of about 1,500 people. And I've been the engineer responsible for software engineer hiring for about the past 4 years, including during a major hypergrowth phase, which is when we started working with Karat to help us succeed at that. For the past 2 years, we've been quite focused on diverse recruiting efforts, both women and underrepresented minorities, and we're just really honestly starting to see the results of that in the past 6 to 9 months. So that's been our journey.
Thank you very much. Ivory, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivory Johnson, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Senior Manager of Diversity Recruiting here at Better.com. In Better.com, we're really making homeownership simple, faster, and most importantly, more accessible for all Americans. And most of my work is also reflecting back on our mission and trying to create a more representative workforce so that we are creating equal and opportunities for all people. So my role is really designed to figure out how can we gain access to underestimated talent from different communities, but also creating equitable opportunities internally, and also ensuring that we are retaining talent. So yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. To introduce myself, I'm the Director of Employer Brand and Recruitment Marketing at Twilio. And my role is super exciting because I actually get to enable our talent acquisition team to be able to build a diverse and inclusive workforce. And we're really passionate about that at Twilio. And we have a couple of different strategies, from going where others don't to being really intentional about our hiring. And we actually recently released our impact report 2 weeks ago, which delves into a little bit of some of the programs I'll be discussing. But it's a really exciting time for us at Twilio. We're in hypergrowth mode. We grew our Black population at Twilio 2% last year, a Latinx population 1%. Women, I believe, almost 4% or 4 to 5%. So I'm super excited to really start to delve into what are the things that we're doing to build a more inclusive workforce, but also create a sense of belonging so people can really be able to thrive and prosper. And last year in 2020, we made a public commitment to be an anti-racist company. And so I'm also really excited to share a little bit more about what are the things that we are doing at Twilio to ensure that talent of all backgrounds. And then when you think about, particularly Black and Latinx talent that tends to be really underrepresented in tech, but how do we make sure we build a workforce where it's an even playing field? Anyone can succeed. As we start to think about moving into remote friendly, 100% remote, everyone should be able to succeed regardless of if they're in an office or if they're working from home. And so it's been a really transformational year for Twilio. Like most folks on the call, I know it's been quite a year. And so I'm really excited to talk through some of the cool things we're doing to kind of move diversity and inclusion forward at Twilio. And I'm really excited to be with these amazing panelists to also learn what they're doing at their organizations.
Thank you for that. And actually, I do want to come back to the public pledge issue, but I want Mikaela to introduce herself first, and then we'll come back to that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mikaela Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I work at Slack. I lead global leadership and executive recruiting for Slack. So my team hires all of directors and above. I've been in recruiting at Slack for going on 5.5 years. Diversity and building diverse teams is sort of at the core of how we think about hiring at Slack. And I'm really proud to say that with the leadership team that the recruiting team I put in place, last year, 80% of our hires were in leadership were actually from underrepresented backgrounds. That it includes racial, gender, abilities, LGBTQ, veterans. And so really proud of the work that we've been doing so far, and really excited that this conversation is happening in the market, and really happy to network with people at any point to give advice and share some of the tactics that we use internally at Slack.
Awesome. It's great to hear that at least the needle is moving a little bit, because as I've said so many times before, let's never let a good crisis go to waste, especially over this last year. So, okay, so back to the question of public pledges. And we know that many organizations came forward last year, especially after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, to make this anti-racist pledge to be more inclusive. So let's talk about what each of your organizations have done in those terms, and what impact that may have had on recruiting efforts or retention efforts with your existing staff. So Stephanie, since you started that one, I'm going to come back to you and start with that, and then we'll go around again.
Absolutely, sure. Thank you for circling back on that. So yeah, last year again, it was a really tough year. Not just a global pandemic going on, but having to, deal with kind of the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and I think that kind of struck an awakening in corporate America. Because I know, listen, diversity. I'm not a chief diversity officer, but I know there are folks who've been in this field for years and for decades and have been saying the same thing. But I think it sparked something, and I know for Twilio, what really impressed me was our leadership team, our E-team, our executive team. They came up with a corporate BPM, so kind of a business priority and measures in terms of what were we going to commit to doing as an organization. And there was a series of things. So first of all, Juneteenth, we made that a permanent paid company holiday, and that's always something that we're going to honor and recognize, we were also very intentional. So I think when we talk about diversity in tech, we tend to lump in very different communities, but we were very clear about what are we going to do for Black Twilions. And so we came up with some different programs in terms of talent development, specifically Better Up, Rise Up coaching. We offered those to Black and Latinx Twilions as a way to really start to think about professional development. How do we grow more people? We make commitments around promotion rates, ensuring they're equitable, making sure we're looking at that. Pay, equity, parity, that's something we analyze consistently. So making sure that beyond just hiring, how are we making sure that everyone is thriving? And then a really big thing for us actually was beyond just kind of hiring, was really thinking about who we're hiring. So we wanted to hire more senior Black and Latinx talent. At tech, that tends to be the challenge. And that's one of our big priorities for this year. And so pretty much a couple of months after that announcement, we hired a chief diversity officer, and we've been hiring some more different leaders at the company. But for us, it was really around this, how do we, beyond just in the moment, how do we really start to think about all of our processes? So everything from recruiting, retention, who we're promoting, and then of course, building a culture of inclusion. So ensuring our ERGs, people had a safe space to get together, talk about things, ensuring that it was fully funded to really deliver on that employee experience where Black employees felt like, I have a place at Twilio, I can thrive. A lot of education, so rolling out inclusion training, letting people understand, the impact of microaggressions and how that could create a less than stellar employee experience. So it was really looking at holistically, what is the employee life cycle and what are the things, the processes that we should be doing to build an anti-racist organization. And again, I mentioned our Twilio impact report. If that's something folks are interested in, I'd recommend checking it out after the call, because again, we list out everything from a talent acquisition, talent development, and then kind of the employee resource groups, kind of showcase some of the things we did to really hold true to the commitment, the public commitment we made. And I can tell you in terms of impact, like I said, we grew our Black population 2% last year, Latinx 1%, and women, I believe it's a little bit over 4%. And then our employee engagement score, it was the highest it's ever been. And then I think, again, it's a hard year. And the great thing about Twilio is we tend to come together during these challenging times. And because we not only made the commitment, but we started to deliver, we've definitely seen an improvement in our recruiting and then our retention efforts as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to have numbers to back it up. I think that a lot of the criticism with the way that some of these organizations' pledges were made was that it felt very performative. And so you really need to have something that ties it to some sort of business metric, I believe, in order to make it feel like something that you could actually carry out. Ivory, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to come to you next. What have you seen at your organization?
Yeah. I will and Stephanie, thank you for just your insights there as well. I think, so I've been at better.com for 2 months or so I'm pretty new. But prior to Better, I worked at Twitter and Google. So I can speak just from what are we doing at Better, but also what have I seen across the industry so far? So one, I know Better, we have committed to being a more inclusive employer. But I think even thinking back to our product, we really want to make our product even more accessible to people from all communities. And we're trying to do the same internally as well. But I do think it goes beyond pledging. And it's really about being intentional around how do we ensure that we are shifting mindsets, that we are training our hiring managers and our middle managers and even our interviewers around how do you manage maybe someone with a disability, right? So thinking through some of those things a little bit, but from an industry standard, I think some of the things I've seen, especially with what happened this summer, it was very, very heavy, right? And we were, I think, even as employees, we were all tired. It was so much going on in addition to being in a pandemic. It was a lot. And I think some of the things I've seen just from at previous employers were just taking a chance to stop, recognize what was happening, and breathing, understanding that our employees are probably feeling the same exact way, and allowing them to speak up about their experiences and holding space. And I think over the summer, I've heard this term around like holding space very much. And I think it was needed, especially from like a mental capacity standpoint. So, one thing at Better is we have many employees from different industries, backgrounds, educations, from all walks of life. And we are committing to we're committing to each of those employee populations, but we're also committing to just continuing to learn, grow, and evolve, because we can't just solve this in one day. This is a journey and it's going to take time. So I know that's definitely a commitment, and it's top of mind for myself.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard holding space, and I've heard grace and patience. And those were the words that I think carried a lot of us through the last 6 months of last year, where it was a very challenging time. Portia, has Karat made a public pledge to be anti-racist?
Absolutely. And I will tell you that I am proud to say that I work for a company that puts their money where their mouth is. And so last year we pledged $1 million of, and for us to be a small company, let me just say, make sure that everyone understands that we are less than 100 full-time employees. And we made a $1 million pledge to help specifically Black software engineers with our interviewing practices. And so that's where we basically evolved Brilliant Black Minds from, because we went out to not only Howard University, but also Morehouse. And we also are partnering with Jobwell to actually give feedback to so many people who otherwise weren't really familiar with, how do I do a technical interview? What I found from some of the students, they thought that the interviews were actually going to be behavioral. So when they got in an interview and all of a sudden it wasn't what they expected, then they were somewhat floored by that, and they lost their confidence. And so what we've been able to do is go in and help build their confidence back up by helping them to understand what is a technical interview and giving them feedback, because no company here is actually going to give them feedback when they do interviews. And so I will say that that's one of the things that we did externally. So we've had a very positive response, because we've had people who have applied for opportunities at Karat. No one's left who's actually worked on the program. So people are all the time excited about what we're doing. And so I feel like action speaks louder than words, and money talks, and what walks. So
Absolutely.
at Karat, we're trying to do it, but we're also, and I know some of the other people mentioned what they were doing internally. So we also recognize that we didn't have to pull our employees; they were pulling us more so, and saying, what can we do differently? We want to learn. And so one of the things that we did is we made a commitment for them to be able to buy books, to learn, to have book clubs, to open up dialogue, to have those sessions so that they could speak freely about how they were feeling. Many of them talked about their participation in some of the protests that were going on. And so it just gave us an opportunity to really see how we could come together as a community and really make a difference. And so we gave each one of our employees at least $100 to go out and buy books, become more knowledgeable, because some of them said to me, I'm really not sure what has happened in the Black community over the years. I've been so sheltered. Help me understand. And then we actually have 3 pillars that we're really focused on, not only access, but fairness and inclusion. And in the inclusion portion of it, we're doing a baseline survey to find out where we are, because we know that we've got some people who are in those executive level positions like myself and our head of IT who are of color, but we also, and we just, as a matter of fact, added a woman to our leadership team. So we feel like we're doing some of the right things. And I can't say enough about our leadership team, who said, I want to learn more too. So it wasn't just our employees, but our leadership team said, I want to learn. And so our co-founders are actually hosting info sessions, or I call them roundtables, with all of our Black employees so that they can ask questions. And there's no question that is barred from that conversation. And so that's been very eye-opening for all of us. And I think our leadership team appreciates hearing the voices of others. And quite honestly, as a Black employee, we appreciate being at the table. So those are some of the things that we're doing, not only externally. And I will say that when I listen to the students who say, and I will say, I have them call me Miss Portia. Miss Portia, you know, I thought that I was going to do well when I was interviewing. I came back, I did a boot camp before I came back to college. And yet when I got there, couldn't get past the first interview. And when they worked with us and we gave them 4 interviews per semester, this one guy came back and said, I got my dream job. I was able to get my dream job where I wasn't even getting in the door before I started practicing interviews with you all. So I know that program, Brilliant Black Minds, is making a difference. So I'm pleased to say that we're at Karat, we're all about making a change and giving access, closing that access gap.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into some more of the strategies, but I want to go to Kat and Mikaela about this public pledge and how that's playing out in their organizations. Kat, why don't you take it next?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of touched on this, but talk is cheap, and the public pledge is a thing, and it's important that we did it. But it's really, what do we do to follow on, and how do we follow it up? And I'm similar to what other people have said. I think our employees have been excellent at holding us accountable, because they want to know, like, what are you doing? How are you moving this needle? And I do think that the difference for us is sort of the level of doubling down. Like in software engineering at Flatiron, we'd already been focused on underrepresented groups for quite some time. And I felt that last summer we suddenly had just more support for more company support for pushing out timelines and spending dollars, and just felt a little bit more supported and less like I was yelling into the wind on it. So I think that was just a nice, a positive outcome of a really terrible set of things last summer. I definitely think a lot about the short and the long game. And I think when we're talking about senior talent, a lot of us are fighting over the same, fantastic individuals. And what I love about Karat's program, and something that we've tried to do as well, is how do you expand the pool? I'm excited about their program, and something we do as an apprenticeship program with a sort of similar idea of like, hey, there are folks who are going to be amazing engineers in a year if they get a chance to, learn and get into your environment. How do we find those people and get them in the door and get them for us early? So I think that's been an important part of it as well.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely want to drill down into those strategies. Mikaela, last but not least, what's happening at Slack?
So much is happening at Slack. So I want to start off by saying that I appreciate companies that did the public pledge. I think people that did the public pledge and companies that didn't, obviously you say a lot when you make a statement, you also say a lot when you don't make a statement. And on the flip side, I think a statement is great, but there's also like performative action is just like not necessarily going to be very impactful. And I don't think it's really what especially communities of color want to see. And I think most of us want to see, right? So Slack, we did, a statement condemning white supremacy and standing with Black Lives Mattering. And we're very, very clear with that intentional wording. Our CEO actually spent, it was, we had just, we have public earnings calls, and he took a lot of his press time to discuss systemic white supremacy and how detrimental it is, which to have an executive spend his platform, which is really talking about, the metrics and the success and the roadmap for the company to discuss that, I think is probably kind of legendary. So that was really amazing that he made that step sort of like right in the beginning. But Slack has a lot of amazing programs that we have internal that are non-performative. We obviously have ERGs. We have an ERG that is our earliest ERG of color called Earth Tones, and it really encompasses anyone that doesn't identify as Caucasian. We also recently branched off to start Mahogany. That was about 1.5 years ago. I'm one of the co-leads for Mahogany, and that's for people who identify as part of the African diaspora. And when the murders happened in a series of events that I think shocked everyone. You know, our Black population was hurting. People were having a hard time focusing at work, having their humanity debated on social media and in the news is just extremely exhausting. And so we held space as we had a couple different events that I think were really impactful. Just, I never knew the power of an ERG until last year. I've been involved in ERGs my entire career, and it wasn't until, you know, we all got together basically, you know, in a room, we're all remote in a Zoom, and we just like heard each other. We just shared, you know. I had one of my colleagues who's very senior in the organization. He grew up in the South, in not the best area. And he's like, you know, I grew up seeing some pretty horrible stuff, you know, violence, stuff like that. And he's like, you know, and I've been able to move past it. I've been able to grow. And he's like, I just don't feel like myself. It's like, I can't not feel like myself. And so having those couple hours together, the level of solidarity felt really impactful. And then our staff, we had a meeting with our CEO, and he just wanted to hear. He wanted to hear what we wanted to see. He wanted to hear what we didn't want to see, and what action we wanted to take. And so I think out of that, there's just been a lot of more doubling down on non-performative work. So Slack has a program called Next Chapter. This is also tied to talent, and that, you know, talent does not discriminate. Talent doesn't necessarily go to Ivy League schools. Talent doesn't have a color or a gender. So Next Chapter actually works with formerly incarcerated individuals and that have served their time, and it partners with The Last Mile, which is I think a John Legend organization, where they train folks to learn how to code, learn how to do tech jobs. And from there, basically Next Chapter is a brainchild from Slack in terms of we call them apprenticeships as opposed to internships, and organizationally within Slack. So we've had, I think we've had our second cohort. I can't speak to it, you know, verbatim, but those individuals, all the apprentices, have turned into full-time employees of Slack, and they are amazing contributors. They're brilliant. And so we're really excited to see more tech companies actually roll out the Next Chapter program to, again, understand that, yes, talent comes from university and from the lower roles. It's important to see representation and leadership, but it's also important to have the discussion of the fact that we have people that are being incarcerated and being held accountable for the worst decision in their lives. And one moment should not define you. And we should give people the opportunity to have careers and to contribute to society in a meaningful way. And I think that's when real innovation will happen.
100%. There are companies out there that are working on retooling assessments as well, because especially for formerly incarcerated folks, just checking the box can eliminate you. And it's across the board, you know, anything from a DUI to some more serious crime. And that's not terribly fair either. So, but that's a whole other discussion for another time. I want to get into the nitty gritty of recruiting, because that's why everybody's here today. But first, we are at the half-hour mark. So I'm going to ask Nick to come back on and do his thing.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. And thanks for participating in this incredible conversation. I'd like to remind anyone that's joining our webinar in midstream or came a little late that we are from day one. And this webinar is called How to Be Anti-Racist in Your Tech Hiring. And our sponsor today is Karat. As promised, I'm going to share a link to our other survey in the chat right now. If you guys can fill it out. We got tons of responses to the first one, so really appreciate that, guys. This next one is about the concept of multi-generational workforces and age diversity in hiring. We are really honored to partner with AARP on this one and worked with them on coming up with some new findings. So this is pretty cool. Age is often overlooked in the diversity business, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about some of the reasons why that might be, or alternately what you guys are working on with that subject. So please click on this one. It's a really interesting survey that you can fill out right now. And these panelists would love to hear from you too. So you can submit your questions for the panelists for this webinar at any time as well, that's in a different tab, also in your Zoom client. That's the Q&A session. And in 26 minutes at the top of the hour, we will start opening up your questions for the discussion as well. And Lydia will do that. And thanks again. And back to you, Lydia.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready to talk recruiting. And my first question is about strategies. Actively recruiting underrepresented talent seems like a tall order for some companies. They just are sort of casting about for, where do we begin? So any concrete strategies that any company can use that have worked for you, I am all ears to hear it. And especially if anything's changed in the last year. Kat, I want to come to you first.
Sure. So, a couple of things. I think the Rooney Rule has been really powerful, and maybe not for the reasons that are inherently obvious, but in that they force a conversation. So the fact that metric is front and center, and it's a little complicated when you have an open, so we're always hiring engineers, so we have an ongoing pipeline, and I think other companies in hypergrowth have the same thing. So it's not exactly like we interview for a role, we pick a candidate and move on. So it's been interesting to adapt it to that environment. But it's really facilitated a conversation between the recruiting professionals and the engineers. It keeps it front and center and means that we're always thinking about it and always talking about it, which I think has been really powerful. The other concrete thing we've done is 100% of our sourcing, basically, at least in engineering, is towards underrepresented minorities, both women and people of color. And we still get inbound, and this may vary depending on your brand and how everything works. But we still have people from inbound, but where we're putting our time is 100% towards these things. And it's not fast. Like, we are seeing results, but it took a year before we really shifted our female representation. And it's taking another year. We're just kind of turning the corner now and shifting, Black and Latinx talent. So it's a long process, and you got to stick with it, because it will not pay dividends right away unless you're very lucky. So I think that's a big piece of it too, keeping on it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've been very curious about the Rooney Rule and how it's played out in different ways in different companies over the years that I've been covering workplace issues. And some have even gone so far to do what they're calling a double Rooney Rule, because there is some thought leadership that suggests that just having one candidate from an underrepresented background is almost certain not to get that person all the way through the process, that you need to have more than one. So interesting. Ivory, what's happening at Better?
Yeah. I would say, like, for me personally, I have remained steadfast in my commitment to just identifying undiscovered talent. And I think there's no right strategy. We're all trying to figure it out, and no one really has the right answer. And I don't know if there is even a right answer. But I've seen, from an industry perspective, the Rooney Rule come up a lot. And personally, I don't really know how I felt about it. But I think we tend to hire people that look like us, that come from similar backgrounds as us, which causes problems in diversity and representation across teams. So I've seen it work well at some companies and not work well at others. But I think it's the point. I think the point of it is, like, around intention and creating that intention to find and engage and hire underestimated talent. At Better, we continue to just commit to actively recruiting underestimated talent in many different ways. And some examples of these are, like, for instance, our internship development programs. We recently placed about 20 candidates from underestimated communities into our engineering internship roles. We're formalizing partnerships with many different organizations to just understand, one, how do we engage and hold space and figure out, like, how do we hire some talent from underestimated communities for specific teams specifically. So some of those partnerships around, like, Afrotech, Grace Hopper, and so forth. But we're also focusing on, like, some early career placement firms as well, and trying to figure out, like, how can we place candidates early into our process. So partnering with Ripple Match, Year Up as well. So for us, we're really big on trying to find access and really creating more opportunity to find and fill our pipelines at the beginning with underestimated talent. So that way we are engaging with more talent in the beginning of the process.
Yeah, those are definitely, I like the way you're saying underestimated talent, because it's usually underrepresented but underestimated is kind of an interesting way to put it. And if we're talking about intention, that's a very intentional way of looking at a candidate that you might not look at in other circumstances. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So it's actually a term that us at Better we began to adopt. And I think it's because we think about talent as a talent from non-traditional backgrounds as just being undiscovered, not being able to have the access. So thinking about it from the lens of like being underestimated versus being underrepresented, I think is we think that it's a better way to talking about it and having a conversation.
Absolutely. And I've actually eliminated, as much as I can be mindful of it, the use of the word minority, because I think that doesn't do a service to a group just in general. So underrepresented, sure. Underestimated, I'm stealing that one. But anyway, thank you for that. Mikaela.
Yeah, specifically to your question around how to try to remove and be anti-racist in your hiring, competency-based interviewing, I think, is key, is really getting clear on what you're looking for from a competencies perspective, as opposed to people going with their gut, their feeling, someone they relate to. Like, we have to be honest, we all have biases. The nature of bias is it's unconscious. We all do. Each one of us on this panel, each one of us listening, we all have it. And what's really, really important is to remove bias as much as you can in the interview process. There's a lot of.
I want to stop you just a second, though,
Yeah.
because I wanted specifically to talk about the recruiting part before we start to talk about the hiring process. So,
okay.
So is there? No, that's okay. So tell me about, like, is there a way to remove the bias from the recruiting process that you're seeing?
I mean, honestly, so what we're doing internally or what people can do themselves? Because what we're doing internally, I think it's probably the opposite. We're trying not to have bias at all in our process, and we drive, we source underrepresented talent, we do events, we do all this sort of stuff. Honestly, it sort of starts at the beginning. The gatekeepers of HR and the people organization, you need to have diversity in your HR and your recruiting organization, because people can have metrics that they're tied to and expectations. But I think when you have people that are from those communities in those roles, they're going to have a different affinity when they're supporting hiring managers, or they're actually going after talent. And then again, we go after talent. Talent does not discriminate. So we've had partnerships with Code 2040. We've had partnerships with Europe. There's a lot of different partnerships we've had. We also are very proactive in terms of how we look at talent. So we go after female talent, we go after underrepresented talent. But I think when you talk about recruiting, like, recruiting isn't just like getting the talent, it is the hiring process. It's all of it, right? And if you're talking about just like how you source talent, you also have to talk about how that talent moves throughout the process. Because the Rooney Rule, again, is great, but it doesn't necessarily like move the needle, right? You have to have a diverse pipeline, and the more diverse your pipeline is, the better chances you will have a diverse outcome.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We've had pipelines that are very diverse, and we've still, at the end of the day, hired, a white male into the role, right? But if you don't have those very diverse pipelines and you don't have bias taken out of your hiring process, you're guaranteed to not have a diverse population within your organization. And then you also guaranteed not to have the strongest teams or the strongest product. Because if you have a global product, it's going to be used by all kinds of people.
Right.
And
exactly.
if your product, the people making the product aren't, having those perspectives, you are naturally not going to have the strongest product. So from a business perspective, diversity is very, very, very important. And it's one of the most unstrategic things that an organization can do to not focus on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and when I think about this, I think that not that recruiters can be lazy, but in addition to a level of unconscious bias that we are all prey to, there's this notion of what the pipeline is. And, as Nick said in the introduction, the pipeline problem is a myth, and we're here to bust that myth. And one of the things that I saw unfold over this last year is that there was a reevaluation of where talent can be, because we all started working remotely. So you don't need to find somebody in your backyard. So therefore, the tech companies that are in the locus of Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley, as they sometimes call New York, or what other alleys or Silicon whatevers anywhere else in the country, talent can be anywhere. So is there a strategy that has developed over this last year that has tapped into that to bust that myth wide open? Stephanie, you are nodding vigorously, so I am coming to you.
Absolutely. So yes, Twilio, we take an equitable approach to hiring, and we go where others don't. So listen, you don't have to you don't have to have gone to Stanford or Harvard to be here. We're very intentional about our school selection strategy. We go to HBCUs, we go to HSIs. We are moving towards being remote friendly. And I'm one of those folks who 7 years ago, I had to move out to the Bay Area after getting my MBA to get into tech. That doesn't really matter anymore. We're hiring remotely for most of our roles. We don't have to be based in the Bay Area. And so particularly with trying to hire more Black talent, that tends to be on the East Coast, that tends to be in the South. And so you no longer have to be in the Bay Area. So I think for us, that has helped in terms of being able to find more talent of different backgrounds. Is just knowing folks don't have to be in the Bay Area. That's opened up a world of opportunity for us at Twilio. But I will say again, there's a strategy and there's a real life. And I think it might have been Mikaela who mentioned this, but one thing we saw at Twilio, once we started to do more of these D&I partnerships, and I think we've partnered most of the orgs I've heard on the call. So everything from Lesbians Who Tech, Afro Tech, Sisters in Sales. One thing that was really interesting for us once we started to go to HBCUs was we found that as we were increasing our presence in these campuses, they still weren't going through the interview process. They weren't making it all the way through the interview process. And so we started to look at the data, and it was really interesting. A recruiter actually came up with this idea of doing we call it Twilio Unplugged, but it's an interview prep series where it's really aimed with providing candidates with the right tools, skills, and knowledge to be able to pass our interviews. And so we did a technical run around HackerRank to align with some of the engineering roles so students could understand how do you pass a test. We did a star-based interview once, I think when we were having a sales hiring surge, so people could understand how best to show up at interviews. But once we saw, okay, we've increased our presence at HBCUs, they weren't necessarily always going all the way through and getting the offer. What do we need to do to help support them throughout the process? So that was one thing we did. Someone mentioned the Rooney Rule, same thing at Twilio. We call it the inclusion rule. And again, the similar principle of how do we make sure we're bringing a diverse slate of candidates to the table. And again, not being in that situation where it's one person, because we do know what the research says, but if we're bringing that slate, let's make sure at minimum we have 2 people so it gives people a better chance. And then something that I think, you started to talk about bias. At Twilio, we have the Bar Raiser program. And what it actually is, it's a way to mitigate bias from the hiring process by having a neutral interviewer. So we banned the term culture fit. I don't care if you want to drink beer after work. First of all, I don't drink beer, but these things and some of the traditional ways people have thought about interviewing or hiring people, I want to drink a beer, it tends to exclude people because that's just, I don't care about drinking beer. I want to know, can you do the job? And I want to know, can you fit into the company culture? And I think that's a part of recruiting that we need to touch on is companies are different. Twilio, it's hyper-growth, it's fast, it's fun, you work hard. But there's some people where it may be a better company for their needs, might be working at maybe a GE or a more established company, and that's okay. And so I think part of the interview process with the Bar Raiser is we have a neutral interview on the panel. That person's not on your team. Yes, when you interview, your future manager, people on the team that you'll be working with, but we have a neutral person that's completely separate. And the goal of that person is to pulse you on your company values. And so we have different company values, from be inclusive, to draw the owl, to write it down, to ruthlessly prioritize. And the goal of that person during the interview process is just to dig into your experiences and understand, in terms of Twilio magic, which is what we call our values, is it something where you would add to the culture? So that's really a way that we've been able to think about kind of mitigating biases. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of finding talent, particularly non-traditional talent, is software engineering apprenticeship program. So we've had that at Twilio for a couple of years now. I think we're going on about our 6th cohort. And initially we started in SF. Last year we went to Denver, and now we're starting to expand to more locations. But we tend to have about 6 to 8 people, and these are folks of non-traditional backgrounds, with the goal of training them, providing mentorship, and 6 months after, they're in software engineering roles. And from the data, we found anywhere from about 90% of folks get converted to full-time hire, so really high conversion rates. And we've had people who were sushi chefs, people who worked in nonprofit, someone who ran a winery but wanted to get into tech. Having that program where for 6 months you go through it, we have engineering leaders, and a lot of our engineering leaders are committed to supporting hiring from this program. These are the flavors of things that we've done at Twilio to be able to recruit a diverse workforce, but also mitigate the bias. So it's not just you can go to as many schools, you can do as much partnerships, but how do we intentionally mitigate the bias? How do we level the playing field as people move through the process to make sure they make it through the end? And that's where we started to see some of the amazing results that I talked about, which again, like I said, it's showcased in our impact fund, and I'll make sure to drop a link, because I think once you really start to see just the impact of, again, our female workforce, we grew that by 6%, women globally, 6%, which is huge. So just really being intentional, and some of the amazing things, similar to some of my panelists have said on the call, really instituting those different programs and seeing it through, we've been able to move the needle on D&I at Twilio.
Portia, I know that you had mentioned earlier about candidates coming in for a technical interview and thinking that it was going to be a behavioral interview. And so slightly different question is addressing barriers to entry that prevent underrepresented talent from advancing through the hiring process. Mikaela also talked about this a little bit, but can you talk about a little more about what Karat is doing?
Well, I will tell you, one of the things that we're real proud of is that when we work with companies like a Flatiron Health, we get their resumes. And what we don't worry about is a resume. We don't even look at the resumes. We know we have the contact information from whoever the candidate is, and we just want to know, are they able to code? It doesn't matter what school they go to. It doesn't matter how many years of experience they've had. The bottom line is, can you code? We don't care whether they are a purple person, a blue person. That has nothing to do with it. I don't care how much they're tatted up. We don't care. Can you code at the end of the day? And that's when Flatiron is saying, please give us the best and brightest. And so we're able to pass on the best and brightest. It doesn't matter whether they came from a Stanford or a Spelman. We want to cut out all of that bias. And some people I've heard, or other leaders that I've even coached, have said, some of the schools we didn't even know how to pronounce, so therefore we didn't even look at those resumes. And at Karat, that's not the way we operate at all. We don't care about the school. We care about the person's ability to actually do the work. And so I think that's eliminating some of the biases. But certainly with the students, I think more than anything, giving them an opportunity just to be able to interview and to know what the interview is all about is making a true difference. And that's what we're doing with Brilliant Black Minds, and going out and doing the training and development and saying to them, let me give you some feedback on how well you did and what some of your development needs might be, so that the next time you interview, you have a little more confidence and the interview is going to go a lot better. But I think it all starts at, I feel like sometimes companies may go to any given school and they're picking the fruit. I believe that we all have to feed the root. And so that's what we're doing at Karat, feeding the root to make sure that we've got that pipeline that everybody is after and making sure that it's certainly diverse.
I'm sure many of the HR leaders in the audience, if they're tuning into this particular panel, know what a technical interview can entail. They're tough. You're put on the spot. Sometimes you're in a room with like 5, 6, 7 people who are watching you as you stand at the whiteboard. I mean, I get sweaty just thinking about it, and there's no way I would ever be in a situation like that. Do you think that that is a big barrier to entry for talent from underrepresented groups, undiscovered, as Ivory says? Or is there some other way that we can make this more of an equitable process? Open to anybody's jumping in on this one. Go ahead, Mikaela.
So yes, many, fun fact, I think Stanford actually has a program where they teach people how to pass the whiteboarding part of an interview in their computer science program. So people that go to those Ivy League schools have a leg up. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're stronger engineers. It's just that they've done a class and they've been taught how to do it. One thing that we did implement in early days at Slack on in terms of our technical hiring was we had the coding exercise that people could do at home, and they could do that on their sort of own time. I think that works for some people, especially if they haven't been trained in how to do a whiteboarding type of exercise. And what I've heard from a lot of engineering leaders as well, like when you actually are doing the job, you're not actually writing on a whiteboard, right? That's not necessarily like the best way to showcase how strong you are within engineering. I think the flip side, when we start talking about ageism and we start talking about equitability, there are people that might not have a lot of time to work on a coding exercise at home. So I think I don't know if there's an easy answer except for thinking about your process in the most inclusive way possible. You can do take-home exercises. You make sure to tell someone only spend 2 to 3 hours on this, I think is important, because if someone has children at home and they're working full time, it's going to be a lot harder for them to spend 8 hours as opposed to a young single person who could spend a whole weekend or work on it every night, right? So I think that there needs to be guardrails in place, and you need to think about people that did go to those schools, think about people that might have other things going on, and really to think about what are you trying to get out of the process itself? Like, what signal do you need? And create a process around being able to get that signal and maybe offer a couple different options for your technical talent.
Portia, you wanted to add? Everybody's got something on here, so we're going to go around.
Oh, okay. Well, I will say that I feel like when I'm thinking about those actual interviews, that it does take, in my mind, someone who is doing the job of interviewing to actually be trained as an interviewer. And that's what we've done at Karat. And we do have, Mikaela talked about, people having access that, sometimes they're busy doing other things. We have 24/7. We have the ability to interview anyone 24/7. And so we actually have what we call interview engineers that actually work for us on a part-time basis and actually do the interviews. And they could be working for all of their companies. And so it makes a difference when you have someone that is looking at you and even somewhat coaching you or guiding you through the interview process so that you at least know, I think I'm on the right track. And so that's one of the things that I think also helps in the interview process overall. Just having a live person and being able to do the interview anytime, day or night that you want.
Yeah, well, I mean, the time is such a huge thing because, like you mentioned before, and like Mikaela did, like sometimes you just can't do something between the hours of 9 to 5.
Right.
You've got other
Especially if you're working as
responsibilities.
an engineer already.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hard to interview. So that's why we implemented that.
Right.
And I'll let some others speak because everybody has their
Yes, everybody wants to go on this one. Ivory, we'll go to you next. Kat, we'll go after Ivory.
Sure. So I'll second everything Portia and Mikaela said. I think it's spot on. I think one area where just we tend to forget about is around like the disability community, right? And how do we think, and I think like when we think about disability, we think about disabilities we can see, but we also don't think about disabilities that are invisible. So folks that have maybe learning disabilities that may need additional time, that may need to do a coding assessment in a very different way. And I've also recently learned that this community doesn't even like to speak up around like them needing accommodations. So how do we create, I think us all as professionals, we really need to start thinking about how do we create inclusive processes for, especially in the tech space, for people with disabilities, and that's invisible or visible.
Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, I mean, just as someone who's given over 500 technical interviews in the last 5 years, I think, first of all, spot on to everything everyone else said. And I want to just reiterate Mikaela's statement about competencies being huge. And it's not just competencies. Like, I think we like to kind of badmouth the whiteboard interview. Oh, it's unfair. It's like, it's not one thing or the other. It's how you present it and what you're looking for. So something that actually Luz from Karat said to me, which I thought was just really impactful, is tell people what you're looking for. So we have a code review interview. And last week, we literally had a conversation about how code review means different things to different people, depending on where they're coming from. Some companies, you're not supposed to look for bugs in code review. Other companies, that's the entire point. So when you just present someone with, here, do a code review, this is a source of bias already from where they came from. And I think those kinds of biases are actually the really subtle things that are really important to lay out. No matter what style of interview you do, tell people, are you looking to just see me solve this problem? Are you looking for me to get the most optimal solution? Are you looking for me to write production code, in which case I should have error handling? Are you looking for tests? Tell people, because different people come in with different assumptions. And I think that's just a really important part of interview training. And I think just to say one more thing about that is it's when you don't train your interviewers, or your interviewing is diversified or distributed, I should say, across your company, and each hiring manager hires one person a year and it's here and there, this is when you get inconsistencies. And so I think there's a lot of value in really in your company trying to centralize at least the design and training of your interview program.
A simple but basic building block, I would say, of any recruitment protocol. We are at the top of the hour, so we are just about to embark on our audience Q&A, and we have many questions, so I want to try to get to as many as possible, but we're going to invite Nick on first.
One more time, thank you to everyone who's participating today. This is how to be anti-racist in your tech hiring. Thank you also to our sponsor, that's Karat. I've seen a couple chat messages so far asking when this amazing discussion will be available as an on-demand video. The answer to that question is very soon. The link will be in the email that you'll get tomorrow. It comes about 24 hours after the event, roughly tomorrow. That'll also have your SHRM and HRCI credit info in it as well. Before we get back to the chat, I'm going to put in one more relentless plug for the surveys that we've been doing this week. These are posted back in chat one more time. If you haven't gotten to them yet, I know a lot of you guys have, so thank you so much. But if you haven't, we really, really, really would love to hear from you. We'd love for you to fill out one or both of these if you can. You got some time still on this webinar to do that too. So with all of that out of the way, at this time, we're going to be taking some questions from our audience. That's you. The Q&A function is at the bottom of your Zoom client. And Lydia will be taking those questions now. Thanks, Lydia.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. We do have many questions from the audience. This is obviously a discussion that we could have for the next 4 hours, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. So Will wants to know what successes you've seen or been part of around making the case for long-term investment on these practices. Hypergrowth companies are so often focused on the next 3 to 6 months that it can be hard to build business cases for the long-term future. So who would like to share some success stories for Will and how you can make a business case for the long term? I'm looking for the mics to be unmuted. Who's going to take this one first? Go ahead, Kat.
Well, maybe I can say something controversial, which is there is certainly a business case around diverse communities. Obviously, we know that's not a controversial statement, but I think that we get too wrapped up in making the business case. When my leadership team had this conversation, a little over a year ago, and we surveyed the team about, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to build more diverse talent and more diverse groups in the company? The number one reason was it was the right thing to do. And so I don't want to say don't build a business case, like do what you got to do. But honestly, my North Star is it's the right thing to do. And it's not as expensive as you might think to actually do it. So just a little bit of a controversial statement there.
It's okay. We enjoy controversy. It keeps things lively. Go ahead, Mikaela.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined Slack, we were a couple hundred people, and I think the first year we had 320% growth within our product design and engineering organization. So to say that we were a fast-growing company is like, I think it was we have been the fastest growing enterprise company in all of history. So we've been on I call it hyper growth for the last 5 years. And we still made sure having focusing on being inclusive in our hiring practices and hiring diverse talent was a priority. So to me, like, you can do it. If you want to be, I'll say something controversial as well. If you don't want to focus on it, I think that's honestly lazy growth and lazy recruiting. Because if your goal is to build the strongest company, strongest product, strongest teams, those are diverse teams. So it's really a call. You either want to just like put bodies in motion and cycle through people, or you really want to build a lasting, successful product and company and be the next big unicorn. So it's up to you what you want.
Well said. I remember Barbara Y back when she was at Intel talking about the business case for diversity. And she said, please stop talking to me about the business case for diversity. If you really want to make a case at this point, make a case for homogeneity because everybody knows that diverse teams are more optimum and will bring better returns. So thank you, Mikaela. Let's go to this next question, which is the onus of diversifying your pipelines is often put on talent acquisition teams. As Mikaela mentioned, TA teams can introduce many different candidates to the pipeline and still end up with a hire that doesn't increase representation for an underrepresented group because the decision ultimately lies with the hiring manager. Here's the question. How have you fostered conversations around representation in hiring with hiring managers and decision makers? Go ahead, Ivory.
Yeah, sure. Would love to answer this question. I think the blame sometimes does get thrown on recruiting for not being able to hire underestimated talent. But I think there's a pipeline issue there, and then there's also like hiring issues as well. And I think it lands both on recruiting and the hiring managers. So one thing that I was able to do in my career at previous employers were, one, being transparent about the data, understanding like what are your gaps as a hiring manager and as a team, and then bringing your leadership team in the conversation as well, and getting buy-in. I think once teams are able to see like the data and understanding like, oh wow, here's our gap, and they can't really see it, I think it speaks volumes. Also, we've also at previous companies introduced different trainings to think about like how do you hire inclusively of all folks from different backgrounds and races as well. So I think there's a number of things you can do, from either like trainings, but also being very intentional about getting the numbers in front of hiring managers and even holding them accountable. I know at Twitter, we started to think about how do we hold diversity in, I guess, holding our hiring managers accountable for that with their bonus and their pay. So linking it to their compensation. That way they're completely bought in because no one wants to lose money, right? So those are just some tactics and that I've seen just throughout my career that have worked.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because in addition to things like the Rooney Rule, we're not technically allowed to have quotas. That's a European thing. The US has yet to institute that, especially for boards. But this notion of holding different executives accountable for getting more diverse talent through the door. tied to compensation, tied to whatever. Has anyone else seen that successfully play out? Oh, I've stumped you all. Go ahead, Portia.
I was going to say, I haven't seen it successfully play out because we tried it when I was at Sprint. And I feel like, as Ivory had mentioned, that it has to come from the top down. There is absolutely no way to get buy-in to make a change without the leadership team believing in it. And they've got to set the bar. They've got to have, in my opinion, just like we did at Karat, you've got to have the representation on the leadership team in order to make a difference so that the rest of the company actually sees that this is what we should be doing. It should be diverse. It should be more women. And so I do believe that it starts at the top. But when we tried to do it at Sprint and we tied it to dollars, oh my God, you would have thought that we cut off their right hand. And so the leadership team folded and didn't do it. But I do believe that there's got to be something tied to it. And I'm just proud to say that I'm working for a company that they all believe at the leadership. So we don't have that issue with the leadership team. So it's truly a blessing, that's for sure. But I've seen it work well, and I've seen it not work so well. But again, it starts with the top.
Another question on this concept of training hiring managers on interviewing candidates. Are there other best practices that you'd like to share?
We talked about competencies, and I think competencies are not just having them, but also having a clear kit and rubric about what good looks like in a competency and potentially what good doesn't look like in a competency. So I'm a big fan of incredibly comprehensive interview kits. So the interview kit should, if it's a technical question, it should maybe have a bank of technical questions that are allowed. It should have what good looks like in each of those questions. It should have a breakdown of competencies. It should have, again, like the specific application of the rubric to those competencies. And if you have a behavioral interview, same thing. You should have, a clear plan for the interview, including behavioral and situational questions that you're asking, what competencies you're looking for, and how to evaluate those competencies. I think that's the number one thing that you can do to standardize and help training. I mean, there's certainly, I think you should also have a training program that involves shadows and reverse shadows and getting feedback. But it's all kind of based on, like, are you starting in the same place? So don't let your engineers, for example, ask whatever question they asked in their last company. Have a centralized bank of questions that you know how to calibrate and what they're asking and what their goals are. And also have a conversation with your engineering leaders or your tech leaders or whoever you're recruiting for about what's important to them. Because, are you a company that is doing high-speed banking and you need people to do micro optimizations? Or are you like building a consumer-facing website, in which case you need people with maybe customer empathy? Really different things at different companies. So have a really concrete conversation about what the most important characteristics are.
I know that a lot of people get hung up on the questions, but it could even go as far back as the way that the job descriptions are written. That can be very exclusive. Ivory, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah. I think, like, going back to your point, Lydia, around like inclusive job descriptions, I think it starts there. Like, foundationally, how are we, if someone visits our job board and wants to like learn about a role, how are we ensuring that it's inclusive and all the language is inclusive? So using tools like Textio to ensure that you have like inclusive language in your job description, I think that's where it starts. I think for one thing that we've done at Better, which I think is pretty cool, is we've actually brought on a military recruiter. And he's a veteran. I had the pleasure of working with him at Google, and now he's at Better, and we work very closely together. But he's actually been able to help us build out, like, how do you even look at a veteran's resume and take that experience and translate it to corporate experience, and being able to ensure that we are hiring veterans, but also ensuring that they are hired correctly and equitably at the right level based on their experience. So I think that has been like the most impressive thing I've seen that Better has done so far, and it's been great.
Yeah, we had an entire webinar. So for those of you who are curious about hiring veterans, just a little plug for the From Day One webinar that happened, I believe, last week on all issues with hiring and making sure that that it's wide open for veterans. Stephanie, you wanted to add some thoughts about training hiring managers?
Yeah, so just echoing a lot of what Kat said, but at Twilio, anyone who does any sort of interviewing has to go through training, again, in terms of even just legally, they're just things you can't say in an interview. So again, in terms of just understanding how to conduct an interview, bias, I think one big thing when COVID happened as well is people are going to be interviewing from homes, people's situations are different. How do you make sure that does not impact your evaluations? Again, I've had interviews where people's kids ran into the shop. It did not matter, had nothing to do with the interview, made sure things like that did not make its way into the recap because that's completely irrelevant. So I think even when you think about COVID and having this preview into people's homes, their personal lives, and everyone's situation is different, being clear about that. And then like Kat said, having a clear list of questions, again, competencies. We don't want people interviewing and asking things that are completely irrelevant or has nothing to do with the job. So I think just that training, and I think we tend to refresh and check in with folks just to make sure they're able to review and revamp. And we've now had it in virtual models where people can always check in. But again, I think just that idea of making sure we're speaking the same language. This is how we assess. These are our company values, because you just don't want people to have kind of different experiences when it comes to interviewing. Because again, candidate experience really is important for us, and that's something that we take very seriously. So again, it's just leveling the playing field, making sure we're asking the same kind of questions, making sure we're looking for the same things, and that we're all evaluating from that fair and unbiased perspective.
I have to go back to something you said earlier, Stephanie, about culture fit and how, there's this sort of natural tendency that we as humans have to, seek out members of our own tribe, right? And if you don't want to go have a beer with somebody, it doesn't mean you can't work with them. It just means you're not going to go out for a beer with them. So how do you craft this interview process to find somebody who fits in the culture in the larger sense of the company's mission, without making it like, hey buddy, let's go play a few rounds of golf on the weekend, and I think that's a really tough one, but I would welcome all of your insights on this.
That's a great question. And I think that's why we have the bar raiser, and that's a neutral party. And it's funny because I'm actually also a bar raiser, and I can tell you sometimes there's this hiring managers want a thing, and your job is to challenge them and hold on, wait a minute. Have you thought about transferable skills? Sometimes it's, well, I just want this. And it's like, well, actually, have you considered this? And so the interview process, it's not, there are ways to challenge the hiring manager, because I've been a hiring manager and hiring managers tend to want what they want. Some people want things that look a certain way, and the way we shape our processes between making sure we're serving up a diverse slate of candidates, it's understanding, are you thinking about level? Are you thinking about needs? Are you thinking about kind of long-term versus short-term? But we challenge hiring managers. We're not just taking orders. We come in as consultants. Well, if this is what you're looking for, actually, this person you might need a level 4. Is this the right thing? And so taking that consultative approach to kind of the recruiting process versus just taking orders from hiring managers, I think is one. Again, it's a training piece. And then for us, I think having that neutral third party person to say, hey, I understand it's a time crunch, you need to fill this role, but I'm telling you, this person is not aligned with our company values and you could have issues. Do you want to be interviewing again in 6 months? Because just, again, for people who are cultural observers, you're able to see things in a hyper-growth environment in a way that sometimes people can do the jobs, but are they the best for the team? And so having that neutral third party helps, because hiring manager, I get it. You need someone to come in, do the job, but we have these checks and balances to ensure that not only is it a diverse mix of people that make it through, but we challenge the hiring manager, because there's always going to be biases in terms of what you need. And I think having that third party helps to really check the hiring manager to say, hey, nope, I don't think this is it, or hold on, you're saying things that if this is a level 3, your expectations aren't right, and you should probably level up this role, and here's what you're looking for. So that's my take, but I definitely would love to hear from other folks, because I think that is the hard part.
Yeah, I want to hear it too. So cultural, like looking for cultural fit without being biased.
Happy to speak. Stephanie, I think like your big point around like holding managers accountable and challenging hiring managers as well is key. I think it starts with like at the beginning of the process during an intake meeting, right? And having more of a conversation and leading that conversation. So saying things like, what skill sets are missing from your team? What would you like to add to your team? Using those keywords and having the hiring manager think through like, okay, like this is what my team looks like. And here's what I think needs to be added to the team. And that can really help them think about like how to, I guess, like considering candidates from like non-traditional backgrounds, right? So I think like guiding that conversation, and then also being able to like challenge if they say like, yeah, I'm definitely wanting someone from a non-traditional background, but I want to hire from the top 10 computer science schools. That limits the pool, and calling them out on that and challenging that, right? So I think those things are key. And I think for like recruiters specifically, is not being afraid to speak up. And I think that's the most important piece, is like being able to speak up and challenge hiring managers and say something. If it doesn't feel right, say it, speak up and say it. And I bet your manager or any of the DEI leaders within the organization would be happy to help you through that conversation too. But I think that's kind of where it starts.
I stumbled across a really interesting interview question that a company called Fractured Atlas, it's an organization that supports artists, uses. And they use it to determine culture and values fit. And the question is, without using the word different, what's your definition of diversity? And honestly, that one kind of stumped me. And I'm a person of words. I mean, I write for a living. Do you think that that's a fair question to ask a candidate? And how would you answer that?
I think that's a fair question to ask a candidate. And, you know, I think people are going to get really tied on sort of the big ones, the visible ones. I think, and it's not performative, but you know, gender and race obviously are really obvious diversity that people a lot of time anchor on. But when I think about, like, for example, when I think about hiring for my own team, because I've built out recruiting teams time and time again, I think about, again, that culture add, like what part of the culture is missing within my team? Because I often say this to my team, we're only as strong as the weakest link on our team. And so it really is like recruiting is a team sport, a recruiting team, they work very conducive and hand in hand. And so when I build out my team, I always make sure that there's gender, age, identity, as much diversity as I can get within a team. To me, like, then I'm like, okay, I've got my like superpower team, because I've seen it work time and time again. So I think having those questions, I mean, we've talked about veterans. I mean, veterans have such a wealth of skill and knowledge, and that's transferable within tech. It's just amazing. Every time I've seen veterans hired without any experience into tech, I've seen their careers just like halt. I mean, they take direction, they're able to adapt, learn on such a higher level. I think it's an incredible training. And then the abilities piece, I think we touched on this a little bit, but we actually have added in a blurb which is anonymous, which basically when we have requests go out for availability, if you have any accommodations that you need to have, please do let us know. And there are people that take us up on that. And I think that's an important signal to talent that you are an inclusive workforce. So I think diversity is important. I think it's important to have people that have hearing abilities, cognitive abilities, and different abilities to really build the strongest product again.
We just have a few minutes left, so I want to do kind of a speed round with this last question. If you had to make one recommendation to our audiences in their companies, large and small, how would you say the best way to attract more diverse talent to the company would be? What's the one thing that they can do? Portia, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I would say that I was trying to unmute myself. I would say one of the things that anyone can do is to think about, especially in this COVID environment, of being able to go to more virtual events, because that's going to open it up for more career fairs, more schools that you haven't been able to afford to go to, that you can go to now virtually. So I would say use the virtual environment as a plus versus a minus, and just looking for talent because it's out there.
Kat, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think this non-traditional background, we mentioned apprenticeship a couple of times. We basically just finished a round of hiring apprentices, and it was magical. There are so many amazing people. It was so easy to hire this apprenticeship class. It's an untapped pool. If you're open to junior talent, there are phenomenal folks out there.
Okay, Kayla.
Clean your house before you invite people in for a party. That's my number one, because, you know, you can recruit people all day long, but if you don't have an inclusive work environment, you're just literally training them to go to somewhere else. And as someone who's been in recruiting for 20 years, I can attest to that is true. So create inclusion within your organization, clean up your house before you try to recruit diverse people. And that way, you know, you'll be able to retain your top talent.
Yeah, I mean, the retention piece is a whole other part of this discussion, and we wanted to kind of focus on the hiring, but that is a very important piece of it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as someone who's comes from a diverse background, I look at how inclusive an organization is. That is a decision making on where I'm going to go. So it's not separate. Your question was around attracting. How can you attract diverse talent? You've got to clean your house. You got to be inclusive, because people talk, the valley's small, and we all know what's going on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I had that stat up at the beginning, and there was like 67% of candidates are looking for an inclusive organization. That's going to make or break their decision. So well said there. I like that little clean your house first before the party. Going to steal that one as well. Stephanie, how about you?
Definitely echo everything Mikaela said. That was amazing. I think for me, my two big things will be, one, going where others don't. So I think a lot of us mentioned it. Look, we don't look for a cookie or cutter resume at Twilio. It's not about, you know, going to Stanford or Harvard. And I think a lot of companies just don't realize how much they limit themselves when they say, these are the 10 schools we're only going to hire from. But at Twilio, we're willing to go where others don't. We've been really intentional about HBCUs, HSIs. And then, like I said, I think for companies who, again, I know not everyone is moving towards either being remote friendly or fully remote, but I think for us at Twilio, we're kind of in a hybrid state. But I can tell you, being able to move away from SF, we've just seen a lot of progress. It's increased leaps and bounds. So I would say any sort of moving outside of some of the typical big cities, SF and New York, you tend to find more talent. And so for us, I think taking that global approach of talent is anywhere. If you're willing to look, you will find it. I think that's one piece. And then I think it's removing barriers. Again, I think a lot of folks have already said it, but you can do all the partnerships and you can do all the outreach, but if you don't have the unbiased process, folks will never make it through. So it's, how do you look at your house, clean it up, challenge recruiters, arm and educate people to understand biases and ways to really mitigate it, so that as you're going out and doing all this amazing outreach to bring in talent, people actually make it through. So I think those are my two big things, but definitely would echo a lot of the goodness Mikaela said as well.
Thank you. Last but not least, Ivory.
Yeah, I will echo everything everyone said. I think as you all were going through it, I was like, wait, I want to say that. I think one thing that I will say that's a little different is, I think some organizations focus on hiring underestimated talent at entry-level roles. And I think we miss an opportunity with thinking about how do we hire into our leadership roles and having leadership representation. I think especially from coming from like HBCUs, HSIs, and even underrepresented groups at PWIs, candidates that come in to our entry-level pipelines, they're really looking for folks in leadership roles that look like them, that come from similar backgrounds. And if they don't see that, then they feel discouraged. So my call to action is really focus on that mid-manager to level leadership level and really think about representation there.
Yes, very good advice. Okay, so we are just about to wrap. So we still had a bunch more questions. Some of them were for specific panelists, and I'll say what I say every time. Folks, if you have very specific questions or you want to connect with any of us, please feel free to do so on LinkedIn or through each organization's website. I'm sure you can talk to these stellar people one-on-one and get a lot more insights. So Portia, Ivory, Stephanie, Mikaela, and Kat, thank you so much for being with me. And back to you, Nick.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Lydia. Thank you for everyone who spoke today. That was a really great and inspiring conversation. Thanks again to our sponsor, Karat. And thanks to all of you who are listening to me now who participated today as well. Thanks so much. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromdayone.co. That's FROMDAYONE.co. You can check out more of our upcoming webinars and our conferences. We have stuff actually scheduled now all the way through the end of 2021 in places on our website. So there's lots of stuff to choose from. But the next two that are coming up next week are the following. On Tuesday, March 9th, we're going to be covering engagement and retention trends for 2021. And on Thursday, March 11th, it's actually a very specific, it seems like a niche topic, but it's a really interesting one, which is reference-based pricing in healthcare. That's the fact, fiction formulas for success. If you've ever heard of this term, this would be for you. And if you haven't, you should Google it because it's an interesting concept that we've gotten a lot of requests for. So thanks again for today, and we will see you next time. This is From Day One.